Hi, everyone. With this podcast, SilverLegend and I thought it would be best if we recorded some of his gameplay on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity as we did the podcast. So we hope you enjoy the gameplay footage along with our commentary. Hi, everyone. Gen X Fusion here with my son SilverLegend, giving you a second podcast, basically talking about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, the game that came out for the Nintendo Switch. If you listened to the earlier podcast, my son SilverLegend had not yet completed the main storyline. But as of right now, we thought we would go ahead and do a second commentary because SilverLegend did complete the storyline for the most part on Age of Calamity. So with that, we wanted to go over some thoughts about the game, his opinions and everything, and also talk about some other things that are how the events of Age of Calamity, what kind of impact does it have on Breath of the Wild, if it does, and kind of go from there. So there will be major spoilers, but we will not go to that part yet until towards the end, and we will definitely warn our audience when we're getting ready to hit the spoiler part. So we're gonna go touch off on the first item here, and basically, I wanted to ask you, SilverLegend, what were your personal thoughts on the gameplay of Age of Calamity, in terms of just the move sets that you were able to do with the characters, as well as the controller smoothness or the smoothness of the controls? What were your thoughts on just those items on the game?
Well, I guess it was good that as Link, if you play as Link, you could change between like multiple different types of weapons. You can use like a spear, or you can use a greatsword. I've used the greatsword before. It's actually not that bad. But I obviously mained the regular one-handed sword and shield. Now, as for the unique actions, for the one-handed sword and shield, you know that you pull out a bow and arrow. I honestly rarely ever use that. I always just charged in there, sword and shield in hand. That's really all I did. And as for the bosses, how you can use like the Sheikah Slate to your advantage. Like some bosses require you to use stasis, maybe Cryonis or Magnesis or the bombs. And I found that pretty helpful, especially against the endgame boss. Yeah, overall it was pretty good. The smoothness of the control, it was all pretty good, I guess.
Good. So you felt pretty good about the way the move sets were, the control smoothness, even having to understand when doing special moves or doing special moves and things like that. That it kind of tipped you off on what worked best against the sub bosses and even the big bosses, right?
Well, I mean, it plays pretty similar to Hyrule Warriors, except going by the fact that you can use the Sheikah Slate to your advantage. If a monster starts like doing, I don't know, a spin attack or like an attack that goes on for like 5 seconds, it'll show like the little stasis sign when it starts up, and then you can use it to your advantage and freeze them and then do your damage. Now, as for some other characters, they can sometimes do like an immediate follow-up attack. So let's say Mipha, for example. Mipha, when she uses stasis, she can immediately do a follow-up attack that could possibly stun the opponent, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Got it. Okay. So let's move on to the next subject, because I think that we pretty much understand that the move sets and the controller smoothness was pretty good on this game. Let's take a look at one of the other features, and basically that's the strategy portion, being able to issue commands to various units in the game, and also the usefulness of the AI when you were controlling one character but you also had the units there with other multiple characters, whether it was Zelda or Mifa or King Rowan for that matter. Um, how? Tell me about the unit commands. Was that useful when it came to strategizing?
Um, so the AI in the game, well, well, I'm not gonna reveal any of the characters that you can play in the game.
Sure.
Um, but the AI, in my opinion, your teammates or the characters you can play as, if you can order them to like go to specific locations or fight specific enemies.
Yeah.
One of the only things I found useful about doing that would probably be that they get to their destination, unless they're obviously halted, but that honestly rarely happened in my gameplay. But yeah, that's probably one of the good things about the AI on your side. They get to their destination, and they honestly avoid all of the enemies.
So probably one of the good things is that if you order them to go to a destination, you can follow them.
Yeah, you can follow them, and
Yeah.
they can pretty much show you the way, unless they take you the long way. But yeah, being able to switch characters, you could you I think everyone should know that if you play the demo in the actual game. But you
Yeah.
could switch characters, which
Yeah.
is pretty good, in my opinion. Uh, yeah, you could switch characters, which is pretty good. And
How useful was that when you were taking on like multiple bosses? Because there are scenarios in there when I was watching you play where you had to take on like guardians and what is it, Lionels, and and just even other sub bosses all at the same time. How useful was it for you to be able to switch characters on the fly?
well, for some bosses, later on in the game, the bosses will become harder. I'll just say that right now. If you think if you thought the game, if you thought you would get through the game without dying once, well, wish you luck on that. The bosses do get harder in the end.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can space out your characters can help you really get the job done. But I would probably warn you that you should probably get to know the characters, combat strings and combat everything about that character very well. Because
Yeah.
the last time I did that, well, let's just say one of my characters died and I failed the mission. Um, but other than that, it's overall useful if you're go if you're if the okay. So let's say you have like
Yeah.
two destinations, and you have four characters at your disposal. I can split my characters up in half. So let's say I have Link on one side. I know Link's combo strings very well, and to be honest, I just main Link overall. And then I would have another character there. It wouldn't now the other character I know how to use that's decently well would be Mifa. Mifa and probably Zelda, since Zelda becomes pretty strong by near end game. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd probably take. I'd probably. Yeah. So find your main character and your sub main character. That's probably gonna be my advice for the game.
Got it. Got it. And the importance of making sure that everybody is leveled. How important is that?
I'd probably say it's actually decently important because quests do get harder overall over time.
Yeah.
And if you are if you are struggling to like level up your characters, you don't have to spend hours and hours of grinding for each character up to their specific level.
Yeah.
You can obviously just go to the training.
Okay.
You can obviously just go to like this little training regiment, and you can spend your rupees to get your characters leveled up.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now,
that's
I'm not
helpful.
saying that's the best way, but it's honestly a good way if you want to just level up the characters you want to level up the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd probably do that and fuse your weapons. Fuse your weapons.
So make sure the weapons are upgraded.
Make
as well.
sure the weapons that you want to main. So for example, yeah, my Link's weapon, it's honestly so I use that throughout like
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Using Link's main weapon is quite devastating.
It's quite devastating.
Yeah.
Make sure you have full hearts all the time.
Yeah.
Helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put so much weapons into that. I still need. It's pretty close to getting maxed out. Yeah, overall, yeah.
Okay.
Importance of leveling up characters. You
Good.
should level up your characters. I'd probably recommend having your character for early game. I'd recommend having your character level at the minimum level
Mm-hmm.
at least until you get level. By the time you get level 22, I'd start leveling up your characters like one or two levels above the max, or
Above
not
the
the
minimum
above the
requirements.
minimum, and then by the time you get to end game, you should level up your characters a lot because the enemies are pretty difficult.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Good. Now we're going to go on to a very, I don't know, I guess you could say a small, somewhat touchy subject. So even though we've had like the strategy and the unit commands and the AI usefulness, real quick, do you find them useful, or is it adequate, or is it kind of like meh?
Well, when you get okay, so when you play the game and you do, let's just say you just happen to perfect dodge, you see the little circle there. Now, yeah, you see the little circle there. I don't necessarily remember what it was called,
Right.
but let's just call it a stun meter.
Okay.
And basically, the stun meter, when your ally attacks them,
Yeah.
attacks the enemy with while the stun meter is up, I noticed that the stun meter does not go down.
Okay. So it's pretty useless with that. Okay.
But I'd probably say one of the useful things to know is that the character you play as is obviously gonna be the character the enemy is gonna target. So they're always gonna target you. My advice is that you always switch characters while on the glow.
When an enemy starts concentrating on you.
Yes,
I got it.
If you're not confident that you can't take on all the enemies, switch your characters. The AI really knows how to survive.
Okay. So that's the one plus with the AI.
They
Even
know
though
how
the-
to survive.
Yeah, the attacks might not be the best, but they know how to survive. That's good. That's really helpful. That's very, very helpful. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that. Now let's hit the touchy subject. Performance and frame rate. How did you feel, and I have my own thoughts as I was watching you, but how did you feel about the performance and the frame rate of Age of Calamity?
Well, I'll just say this. There were obviously some frame rate issues. There are obviously frame rate issues. Now, I wouldn't say it happened all the time,
Right.
but I really do hope that they could probably
Patch that bad boy?
Patch that.
Yeah.
They don't have to fix all of it.
Right.
I'm just saying that there were frame rate issues. Now I'm not saying that it didn't happen all the time, but it did happen a decent amount of times.
Sure. And with the frame rate issues, how did that affect your experience? Did it affect your experience in any way of the game, or did you just adjust to the frame rate issues?
Well, from my experience, it didn't really affect it in a bad way. I got used to it.
Okay, so that's a plus side. Us being human beings, we can get used and adapt to that stuff. Okay.
I got used to it. It was kind of funny on how the game would sometimes just lose frames while I'm in the middle of doing like a combo.
Oh.
But overall, it didn't really mess anything my gameplay up.
Okay. So overall performance of the game, how would you say, if you were to rate it from 1 to 10, how would you rate the performance overall of the game?
If I were to be very critical, 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10.
But if I were to like be very lenient, 7 or 8.
Okay.
7 or 8 because it doesn't necessarily like affect the mission or anything. You could get pretty used to it pretty fast, in my opinion. But
So
that's
obvious,
just me.
It obviously shows up, but as a seasoned player, you get used to it.
I mean, I'm not a seasoned player. I just got you.
He's a seasoned player.
I just got you. I'm not a seasoned player.
Anyways.
I just got used to it.
Yeah, you just got used to it. That's what seasoned players do that. Anyways, okay, so now we've reached the section where we just want to warn everybody that there are spoilers on this because SilverLegend and I did. SilverLegend finished the game. You know, he's
The main
still got
story.
the main
I still
story.
have a
He's
lot
still
of
got a
stuff to
few
do.
things that he needs to do.
A lot.
Yeah, but for the most part, he finished the main story. And so we just want to warn you right now that there are spoilers here. So if you don't want to listen to this, bless you. If you don't want to listen to this, then that's fine. You probably want to stop it or forward it towards the end. Yeah, we just want to let you know there are spoilers
We'll
here.
probably have a timestamp.
Hopefully. So here we go. So first thing that we do know, starting right now with the spoilers, we do know. What is your opinion? Is your opinion on this particular game? You had a theory that it was an alternate timeline, that the game became an alternate timeline, and it changed. It has no bearing on Breath of the Wild in terms of what occurs in Breath of the Wild, but actually, because of the events that occurred in Age of Calamity, an alternate timeline or a parallel timeline of some sort was developed. Do you want to talk about that theory and now see how it's been proven and everything? Is that what you've discovered now that you've finished the main story?
Well, I'm not going to say that it's proven. I mean, there is evidence that, it's possible that's an alternate timeline.
Okay.
But I will. Okay, so there's going to be major spoilers. Yeah, I just realized that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's start with the theory of just the overall belief that you think that it's pretty much an alternate timeline or something parallel. Here's a good question. Will the events, in your opinion, of what occurred on Age of Calamity have an impact on the Breath of the Wild sequel?
That's a good one. We really don't have much information on we don't have a lot of information on the Breath of the Wild sequel.
Right.
I don't want to get very touchy on that subject, not going to lie. I don't want to get touchy on that subject because
this is just your opinion.
We
what are your
know
thoughts?
We know absolutely nothing about it.
Okay. Cool.
Other than
my personal opinion is this is an alternate timeline, and my personal opinion on it is that it's not really going to have any bearing on the Breath of the Wild sequel, simply because it's an alternate timeline, and the Breath of the Wild sequel is supposed to occur
after Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, very soon after the events of Breath of the Wild. So I think that's the main thing. So let's go to the next question. Because we think that time got altered and the events got altered, what was the first clue, or what was the first thing that you saw? At what point did you see that the timeline got altered in Age of Calamity? What was the first sign?
I'd probably say the very first clue that we got was the early arrival of Calamity Ganon.
Okay, Calamity Ganon. So that was one thing. Okay, what about Terraco?
Oh,
the R2 unit.
Yes, that's right. The little guardian's name is Terraco. What was the question?
What was the question is Terraco's appearance. Just appearance. When he jumped back in time. We saw that in the very beginning of the demo. Where it jumped back in time. Do you think that once that little unit jumped back into time, that began the events of an alternate timeline?
Well, I'd say he was the start of it.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say he began to change it.
Okay.
In my opinion, everything began to change when the Calamity struck.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, everything that led up, like Link getting the Master Sword, and I'd probably say the very first thing that started it was the early arrival of the Calamity. Because by the time the Calamity arrived in Breath of the Wild, the Calamity had struck, but Zelda just came back from the Spring of Wisdom.
Sure. That's what we shared about last time.
And in Age of Calamity, Zelda was just leaving Hyrule Castle to go to the Spring of Wisdom. That's when the Calamity struck in Age of Calamity.
So what you're saying then is that the Age of Calamity Ganon was supposed to strike later in the day, or sometime later.
I'd say later in the day.
Yeah, but instead he struck early.
Yeah,
for some reason.
Yeah, he struck early.
Why do you think that happened?
Well, massive spoilers here.
There's more spoilers.
There's way more spoilers here.
Go for it.
I'd probably say it has something to do with the other little guardian corrupted by Calamity Ganon's malice, and Aster.
So that's the other villain that does not show up in Breath of the Wild. Yeah, in Link's memories of Breath of the Wild. But there's this other individual that's doing things to manipulate everything.
Now, if you do for those of you who are probably thinking, well, well, Aster probably did exist 100 years prior to Breath of the Wild.
Sure.
He probably did, but in Age of Calamity, we clearly see that Link fights Aster's I don't know, Aster's malice. Well, it's like these clones of the four champions.
Sure.
When Link was getting the Master Sword,
Okay.
I'm 100% sure Link probably would have remembered the fight
Right.
when he went to go get the Master Sword
Right.
in Breath of the Wild. I'm pretty sure he would have remembered the fight. Now you're probably saying, well, maybe he wouldn't remember. The Great Deku Tree was there. The Koroks were there. Hetsu
Right.
was there.
Right.
Zelda was there.
Right. Right. So you had Aster, who was doing stuff behind the scenes. First of all, you had, first main is the little R2 unit. I always call it the R2 unit, the little ancient guardian showing up on the scene. You have Aster, who's starting to manipulate things. And another thing that shows up is Ganon's early appearance. That's another factor that was involved. What about this? This is an interesting one. What about, this is major spoilers here too. What about the appearance of the champion's successors?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, if you guys are happy, all right. Well, if you guys are happy to see Sidon smile in Age of Calamity, my thoughts on it. I guess it's nice to see the champion's successor.
Yes, they traveled back in time, and it looks like it had something to do with Terrico, right?
Well, obviously, it had something to do with Terrico.
Because the champions were
supposed to die.
They were supposed to die. They were set to be defeated. Even in Age of Calamity, they were set to be defeated.
I mean, you can clearly see them struggling.
Right. But because the champion successors came back in time and basically helped them out, that altered everything.
Yes, but however, in my opinion, in one of the missions, you are sent to go save the champions. Now, although the champion's successors have come to help the champions, if Link and the others never made it to the champions,
they would eventually perish.
They would eventually fall.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Now, the reason why the champions were alive was because of the delay of the champions of their successors.
Yeah.
And also the appearance of, well, the character you play as to help them. For me, I chose Link.
Right. So that totally altered everything. The survival of the champions successors showing up from the future. Now, isn't that interesting? Which future did these champion successors come from? Did they come from, like, the future of what Age of Calamity had done? Or is it the future where it was from Breath of the Wild's timeline? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you paid pretty close, if you paid pretty close attention to one cutscene, where Sidon explained how he got there.
Right.
Sidon explained that he couldn't bear to see his sister fall.
Mipha. Right. So that's pretty much a sure tell sign that they came from the Breath of the Wild timeline.
And there's also, and they all of the successors seem to know Link.
Right. That's another thing so they came from the Breath of the Wild timeline, most likely after
the events of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, after Link and Zelda defeated Calamity Ganon. Got it.
The big black coated pig.
Yeah.
Purple.
So here's the final thought about in terms of alterations that occurred in the Age of Calamity. Ganon's defeat and Ganon's appearance overall.
Oh boy.
This is major spoilers. Go ahead. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, when I fought Calamity Ganon in Age of Calamity, there was a moment where no one could damage him. So, good old me decided to randomly use my special attack out of nowhere, and I missed everything. So I just wait. And keep in mind, all of my characters were almost dead.
Yeah.
All of my characters were almost dead.
They were low on hearts. Maybe we'll upload that gameplay at some point.
All of my characters were almost dead. I had to use... Okay, spoilers again. King roams alive.
King roams alive.
King roams alive.
That's true.
Still. King roams alive.
He is alive.
Still. I had to use King Rome. He was my tank. He had the most hearts out of everyone.
Yep.
I had to use him throughout most of my fight just to defend and deal chip damage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was really intense seeing you do that. And then once you were able to get that stun bar down low enough, you would switch to Link.
I would switch to Link and deal the what's it called?
The weakness.
The weak attack.
The weakness attack. Yeah. So that was intense. I think overall, Age of Calamity, I think it was a wonderful game. It has its frame rate issues. Hopefully, they'll get a patch out for that. The gameplay I think was just overall pleasant. It was great to be able to see that kind of reality.
I completely forgot to talk about his appearance.
Who?
Calamity Ganon's.
Right. Why don't you talk about Calamity Ganon's appearance real quick?
All right. So, which do you find more terrifying? A giant spider with a skeleton face,
Or the pig?
or
the swine later on?
the pig, or would you find? Okay, so if you play Twilight Princess, you would know that when Midna used the Fuse Shadow to fight Ganondorf, you would see Ganondorf's like face,
right,
with like that
right,
Twilight fire,
face, yeah,
the bright face. The face that Calamity Ganon had in Age of Calamity reminded me of that.
Yeah.
That it was just that specific face.
Clearly, Calamity Ganon's form 100 years prior
Was probably
very different.
It was probably very different.
Yeah, it was very different. This was a more humanoid. He kind of reminded me a little bit of from Skyward Sword in some ways.
Demise?
Yeah, there were portions of it that reminded me of Demise. Not everything, but demeanor-wise, just reminded me of Demise in some ways.
I mean, which one would you find more intimidating? A giant spider with guardian weapons and a giant spider with guardian weapons and a skeleton face, or a giant walking malice taken form with Ganondorf's Twilight Fire face.
Yeah.
And he's packing too.
I thought, he was packing. And the other thing is that he was definitely harder than Calamity Ganon.
He was
Breath
much
of the
harder.
Wild.
Okay, I should also mention that shield bashing in Age of Calamity is honestly so hard for me. I never bothered to shield bash. I just dodged or blocked.
Got it. Yeah. So that's it, folks. Those are the main subjects. I know that you still have to do, even though you completed the main story, there's still things that you have to complete. So that you could get I guess you could say the true ending. You've got most of the cutscenes. I think there's only like a few left. But we just wanted to thank everybody for listening to our last podcast.
At the moment.
And then also for listening to this podcast and everything. We plan on doing some more on other games as well. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening with us. We very much enjoyed being able to share our thoughts and opinions about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And with that, we want to say see you later.
See ya.
See you all later. Have a good one. Hi viewers. Remember to subscribe, like the video, comment, and click on the little bell to receive notifications of future content. Have a good one.